our news feeds, our social media feeds, even our general media consumption is all fueled by algorithms that seem determined to put anger and sadness on our faces rather than smiles. And so the news stories that are positive and the trends that are hopeful often don't break through. And because of that, many of us don't see it, don't share it, don't get a chance to talk about it enough. And so this segment, Positive Vibes, is all about making sure that if you miss these positive headlines or trends or stories, that we amplify them for you, that we bring something into your news feed that brings a smile to your face and hope to the future rather than dread or sadness. And so in our first installment of Positive Vibes, I talked a little bit about my optimism and all the research that backs that optimism for a future that could be cancer-free if we dare to dream it. Certainly the significant advancements that have been made in that treatment that have extended quality of life and longevity of life for people with all kinds of different cancers, and the tremendous amount of research going on around the world that's showing real promise for the next generation of breakthrough cures. Well, this story takes us back a little bit to a different era in the world, the era when HIV and AIDS emerged into our common vocabulary. And if you go back to the very beginning of this, there was deep misunderstanding and mistrust and misinformation about what the virus was, where it came from, how it was spread. But even after some of the misinformation was put to rest, there was still a lot of pessimism around the world that we were ever going to be able to knock this virus down throughout all of society, let alone in the poorest countries in the world. And as advancements came in medications and treatments and knowledge, frankly, and prevention, unfortunately, sub-Saharan Africa was one of the places that was left behind by some of those enablements and revolutions in medical treatment. Well, for all of that and for all of the fear that came with it, and for the many, many, many years of deep concern that certain countries may never be able to overcome this scourge, we have a story out of Botswana, which is one of the big health success stories of the last 25 years, and in fact, one of the great success stories in the history of transmissible diseases. A country that was once the world leader, or one of the world leaders, and even by some projections at risk of a mass extinction event. I don't want to over dramatize it, but a country that was so ravaged by HIV that it was one of the top talked about as a place that would be hard to imagine that there would ever be able to be a bending of the curve downward and the prevention and elimination of the virus. And it is now one of the world leaders in eliminating the virus in children, which is a key step towards eliminating its ability to spread and to cause death and destruction throughout the society. So rather than me go through all of the details of all of the various studies and elements, let me read a little bit from The Guardian, a story that was published on Friday, August 22nd, 2025 by David Cox. I encourage you to go to theguardian.com. Under Global Development, you can find the headline, Botswana was once at risk of extinction from HIV. Now it is a world leader in eliminating the virus in children. I'm going to read a little bit from this and then give a couple closing thoughts. At the turn of the century, HIV was so rampant in Botswana that politicians and doctors viewed it as an existential threat. 1 in 8 infants were reported to be infected at birth, while rates of mother-to-child transmission either through pregnancy, childbirth, or breastfeeding ranged from between 20 and 40%. That according to the United Nations AIDS Organization. Between 1990 and 2000, mortality among children under the age of 5 almost doubled due to HIV. This is 25 years ago, 1990 to 2000. With a population of just 1.7 million people, no cure available, and the second highest HIV prevalence in the world, the country's then president declared in 2001, "We are threatened with extinction." The situation was dire, according to Dr. Mazhani, a now retired pediatrician, public health official, and academic at the University of Botswana. If your whole population was infected in utero, at birth, or during early infancy, and the majority of them were either dying or living with significant disability, you could see that there would be no future. But out of this crisis would emerge one of the world's most successful HIV elimination programs. Spearheaded by Mazzani, with backing from others, a series of pioneering interventions were introduced, which over the course of 2 decades slashed rates of mother-to-child transmissions to just below 1%. Think about that. From 20 to 40% down to below 1 over the course of about 20 years. Earlier this year, Botswana was recognized as the first country in the world with a high HIV burden to achieve the World Health Organization's gold tier status for eliminating mother-to-child or vertical HIV transmission as a public health threat. Dr. Ava Avalos, an HIV specialist and technical advisor to Botswana's health ministry, says the transformation was so dramatic that the WHO initially refused to believe the figures that were coming out of the country. She says, we would report that our birth numbers of HIV infections were so low, and they'd say, no, you have 10,000 children that must be HIV positive. And this went on for years until they had to accept the fact that Botswana's program was as strong as they were saying it was. Today, new pediatric infections are so rare, with fewer than 100 HIV-positive infants born annually, that each case is subject to a thorough audit to understand how it happened. Reaching this point required both huge political will, investment in scientific infrastructure, and a sustained public health education program to bring the latest science-backed strategies to those most at risk. Mazzani recalls how one of the biggest challenges was convincing HIV-positive mothers to use formula milk rather than breastfeeding due to the risk of transmission, something that went completely against conventional wisdom for infant nutrition. It meant that if a woman started getting formula milk, everyone in the community would know that she has HIV, he says. Mothers felt ostracized, but over time, that stigma of formula feeding slowly reduced. Roger Shapiro, a professor of immunology and infectious diseases at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health, has run an HIV research program in Botswana since the 1990s. He says a particular turning point was the decision in 2013 to implement WHO's Option B Plus strategy, making antiretroviral therapy that combined 3 drugs freely available to all pregnant and breastfeeding women living with HIV. At the time, Botswana was one of the first countries in the world to fund Option B Plus on a national scale. It became clear that 3-drug therapy was by far the best way to both treat mothers for their health and essentially turn off vertical transmission, according to Shapiro. Research, however, still indicated that these steps alone were not sufficient to completely prevent pediatric infections. Studies show that a significant number of mother-to-child transmissions occurred when mothers unknowingly contracted HIV during pregnancy, with the unborn child becoming infected in the 3rd trimester. To eliminate these cases, Botswana's health ministry invested in 2 laboratories in the north and south of the country capable of analyzing thousands of PCR tests and began offering repeat HIV testing to all pregnant women. While other sub-Saharan African countries, notably Malawi, Rwanda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, now also offer widespread HIV testing for pregnant women, Shapiro says that Botswana's program is particularly effective because of the near universal coverage in the country, with the vast majority of women accessing services and giving birth in hospital rather than at home. Max Kapanda, who heads Botswana's antiretroviral treatment program, says this also allows all babies born to HIV-positive women to be immediately tested and, if infected, started on treatment as early as possible. Such is the success of this testing regime that there is now a unique group of children and adolescents with HIV in Botswana who are thought to have suppressed the virus to nearly negligible levels, having been on antiretroviral medications since birth. At the recent International AIDS Society conference in Rwanda, researchers discussed how these children are ideal candidates for experimental trials that attempt to use emerging treatments to cure them completely of HIV. It is hoped that after this period of time, a certain number of children will be able to live long-term without requiring any drug treatment at all, in effect, rendering them cured. Now, while Botswana's HIV program has been more resilient than most, both antiretroviral treatment and testing has long been funded by the government. The country is experiencing an economic downturn and was initially facing tariffs from the United States before they were cut to about 15% last month. Botswana's economy is very diamond-based, but there's a lot now about the diamond industry which is challenging with the rise of synthetic diamonds and the current situation with tariffs. It also means the HIV program is much more precarious. Previously, if they had treatment or testing shortages, foreign partners would be able to help assist, but now these systems may not be in place. So we can keep reading and go further into the why behind it. But the fact that you have a country that had one of the highest rates of parent-to-transmission HIV in the world, and it literally could have killed off the vast majority of the population of this country, and that through significant international focus, intervention, research, and study, as well as changing some elements of cultural norms, what a tremendous achievement it is that now Botswana has a much brighter future for its children, and that a virus that was once a death sentence now can not only be dealt with, in some cases can be suppressed, and in many, many cases can be stopped from transmitting, is a huge achievement for public health. It's a huge achievement for international organizations, for the country of Botswana, and for those who've supported this program. Again, the article was from The Guardian. It was written by David Cox, published on Friday, August 22nd. And I encourage you to go and look at that article. We will have a link to it here on the program. And hopefully I did it some justice. But as a closing thought to this, I just say there's a lot of stories like this out there. There's a lot of public health success stories that are allowing countries and societies to live healthier, longer, more productive lives. And these are the big achievements we don't celebrate enough and we don't hear enough about in the world. So hopefully you enjoyed this installment of the Positive Vibes. We're going to keep looking for stories like these and share them with you to help break through the nonsense of all the negativity that's sitting in all of our social media feeds, and that the algorithms serve up to us as if they have no other way of giving us information that's useful. Thank you all for listening. Look forward to talking to you again in the next segment.